You're listening to The Lowdown, a podcast inspired by the creative people in the bass making community. I'm Frankie. I'll be sitting down with bass makers to explore what drives them creatively and to find out what challenges they face in the business of bass. Let's find out what it's all about. Let's get The Lowdown. Hey, welcome to The Lowdown. Today, we are super excited. We have Adrian Nunez of Sincopado Luthier Services in Manila, the Philippines. Hey, welcome to the show.
Hi, Frank. Thank you for having me, and it's an honor to be at your show. Thank you for the invitation.
Oh, hey, thank you for accepting. It's our honor too, man. It's our pleasure. So we were just talking a little bit off camera about how it's 8 a.m. here and it's 8 p.m.
Yeah, there's a 12-hour difference.
Well, it makes it pretty easy to calculate, though, which is nice, you know.
Yeah, when I got the invitation, wait, I'm gonna check the time zone first. Oh, okay, it's fine. So just 12-hour difference. So all good, man. So how are you doing? Well, what's up with that bass gear?
We recently just the business that was next to us, as an example, here on the floor of the building that we're in a couple months ago, moved on. So we were able to we took over some of their space essentially.
Okay.
So which is why we have a little bit of shop space I'm currently putting together behind us, because we haven't really had that before. We had been. I had been shooting from our electronic shop, which is over that way, basically.
Oh, okay.
But
cool.
Looking forward to actually be able to make some things, and hopefully, want to make some videos, like some how-to videos, and do some do more product demonstrations and that sort of thing. Really expand what we do, and and there's some products too that we just don't have access to anymore, where. Like a manufacturer who made some of our, for instance, routing templates, retired a few years ago. So there's certain routing templates we just couldn't get anymore. We're going to be able to start making them ourselves.
Okay, I see.
Small CNC setup now that I'm being an older guy trying to figure out how to make it all work isn't as easy as it probably used to be, but we're making some progress.
But the one thing that the pandemic taught us is to really to adapt. Changes.
Yes. Yeah.
Ever. It's really constant.
Well, definitely, like you have a shop too, and I can imagine, like with us, I'm sure there's supply shortages in certain places. So just always trying to expand what we're carrying so we have more alternatives, because the likelihood of being able to get the exact thing that somebody wants all the time in a timely fashion is pretty impossible. So it's great to have lots of alternatives and know what things are relatively similar to each other and could accomplish the same things under certain circumstances and that sort of thing. That's been kind of a challenge, but it's a fun challenge. It could be worse.
Right. So just I'll just give you a quick background maybe on what Sincopado Luthier Service is all about. I think I am the only bass specialty shop here in the Philippines, in Manila. But this is just a small space. I'm just cramped here in in a small space. Basically, I'm also a session bass player here in Manila. Basically for the love of bass, man. I mean, this quick story. Before I don't know how to set up my bass, I used to go to the local Luthier here. But in my humble opinion, and it seems that I'm not really pleased with how they set up my bass.
Yeah.
Most of them are guitar luthiers, guitar players. So primarily here at my shop, I don't do guitars, strictly bass.
Wow.
Before the pre-pandemic, some other cats will walk into the shop and have their guitars here. I'm sorry, I don't do guitars. Strictly for bass. I know it's pretty much kind of the same same process when you set up your bass
Yes.
with a guitar, but the feel is night and day.
Very much. Very much. Well, I mean, let's be honest.
So
You could take a typical set of, like 6-string guitar strings and practically make them into like a low B string. I mean, it's just,
right,
the sheer just mass of the strings. It's a very different instrument. And certain things,
absolutely.
where a
Got you
bass
there.
player may like a certain amount of even, like I like a little bit of like even rattle kind of across the strings if I'm playing on a fretted, as an example. Most guitar players would hate that. But for
Right.
it's like an inherent part of that, that particular kind of sound, and I don't know. I think it's super important for any serious bass player, or even somebody who maybe isn't serious, but to actually understand how to at least adjust your truss rod and set up your own action and adjust your own pickup height and your intonation, because you're the one physically playing it and touching it. So it's hard for somebody to take that instrument and set everything up exactly the way you want it, because they don't know how hard you play or where you play, and what you're expecting to get out of that amount of effort you're putting into it. It's something everybody should be able to do. It just makes it easier, I think.
True, and also I think what makes me different from the other guys here is probably, I believe, in my humble opinion, this thing, when you set up this thing, it requires 50-50. 50% you need to know the player side.
Yes.
And 50% the technical aspect, what to adjust, blah, 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 and so forth. So you need to understand this as a player yourself. A lot. I have been around since 2015. So also, just a bit of a background. Pretty much you are familiar with Sire Guitars. Marcus Miller, the Marcus Miller line. Right. So I worked for that company for a time being, and during 2015, and I brought Sire Guitars here in Manila. And at the same time working as a repair guy here. So pretty much that is the reason why a lot of cats bass players they go here because this is a bass specialty shop. And also with the addition, after Sire, I'll just get this one thing. I distribute also my favorite sets here.
Very nice. Yeah.
So these are my favorite sets out of all. Oh, and good thing, my clients also love these sets. Yeah, so just a quick background about my shop. So pretty much this is all I do: setups, basic repairs. But other clients of mine are pressuring me. Why don't you make your own bass now? And we'll get in there. We will step by step. We'll get in there. I mean, who knows what the future holds. Also with the vast information that is readily available at this point in time. Do you agree with that, Frank?
Oh, for sure. I mean, honestly, in terms of learning how to do almost anything you might consider wanting to do, I mean, obviously, just even if you just take YouTube, there's so much information out there to learn how to do something, especially, be it carving a neck or making an entire instrument or doing fret work or whatever that might be. But still, there is a certain amount, a certain minimal amount of, all these different aspects of making an instrument just requires a very specialized set of skills, but also like you have hanging behind you. I mean, just for setup purposes, some very specialized tools, So
absolutely,
I know that's been a challenge for me, where when I learned how to, to make my first instrument, a friend of mine who used to work at Best Bass Gear, who also went to the remote event school of Luthier, he was kind enough to teach me, but he has a very nice workshop, so I had the benefit of being able to use his tools and his workshop,
Wow.
and everything. So then the pandemic,
being hands on.
yeah, very much, which is for me at least the best way to do something. I need to get in there and damn near screw it up, and
Yeah, for
it
sure.
bailed me out a couple times for sure. I mean, I remember, just being a little bit overzealous with shaping the neck, and he kind of like caught me before I went too far, that sort of thing,
Right.
But at the same token, now that we're trying to set up a little bit of a shop here, I having done this now a couple times, I have like I'm trying to put something together where it's the minimum amount of tooling that I can get away with, in terms of knowing what my own personal process is that I'm trying to put together for making an instrument. So there's certain tools that maybe other people have in their workshop that I don't think I really need. So but I wouldn't have had the experience to think about that had I not done it before, where there's many ways to do certain things,
Absolutely, especially for our instrument, if the small details do count.
Oh, big time. Well,
big time.
Most of what the player or the customer is going to see happens at the very end, really.
Right.
Because you can make mistakes, and they definitely happen. I always say to folks, like, I think people would be surprised at how much super glue is on even production instruments that they get that are brand new, and not always just for things like holding inlays or whatever, but because there were like genuine pieces of wood that would chip off that would have to be put in place, or a hole accidentally drilled too deeply, or you name it. Things happen.
Yeah, things happen, right? I mean, just for the love of the instrument that led me to sustain it from 2015 till this very day, man. And pretty much honored to have the trust of a lot of players here in Manila. And also, by the way, back in the day when I was starting as a player,
how long have you been
the bass play?
Like, when did you start? Like, how
long I just turned 35 last March. I started playing since 12.
Since 12. I started at 12 too. Yeah, but you look a heck of a lot better 35 than I did. So good for you, man.
Thank you, bro. But I'm honestly, I just keep my ears open for the evolution of things. Learn being a student in general, always a student mindset, not just being on as a repair guy, but as a player myself.
Sure.
Honestly, this pandemic led me to do some unlearnings. I believe so in this one, that you need to unlearn stuff to grow.
Definitely. So, I don't think you ever stop. I mean,
absolutely.
I can't imagine a time unless I just lose my facility to be able to learn at some point, which I guess could happen. But I can imagine not ever being curious about things and not wanting to pursue them. That's it. But the only hard thing sometimes is just being able to decide where the attention should go sometimes, because there's so many irons in the fire sometimes, like so many things you want,
right,
and you're trying to learn simultaneously. Sometimes it's hard to decide what should get all the focus, I guess, or most of it.
Aside from that, especially with the word called adulting, right? You need to wear a lot of hats nowadays, man. Like,
yeah,
big time. So juggling this, being a session guy, repairs, also being a family guy. So it's a lot, but it's absolutely worth it. I mean, I'm just taking baby steps, not just I'll enjoy the ride, if I may say, wherever this may take me. We all make plans, yes, that's right. But sometimes you just have to let go and enjoy the ride. If you know what I mean, man.
But also somewhere in there, you have to be a businessman too, right? I mean that's
True, bro. True. But the thing here is, to my surprise, during the pandemic, until this very day, there's still a lot of bass players who send their basses at the shop. I mean, gigs are out. Actually, gigs are coming back just recently, but since March 2020 till early of this year, since January, Philippines got the Omicron surge. So still, more bass players they send their basses here. Maybe because one thing I've noticed is maybe a lot of people wanted to try a new instrument, wanted to learn a new instrument. So there has also been a lot of online collaborations. So they need to have their basses set up, right? So that when they record their thing, all will be well with their tone and playability and stuff like that. So yeah, so far still a lot. That's what I'm going to tell you, that back in the day when I was starting as a bass player, the ratio of bass players and guitar players are pretty much big. I mean, but to my surprise, these nowadays there has been a lot of growth with our instrument as well. Maybe because of the social media stuff, and also the cats nowadays. They are. This is one what I always tell my students. So I also teach back in the day when I have a face-to-face interaction here at the shop. So back in the day, I tell my students, you guys, you have all the information at your fingertips. Back in the day, I will go to here in the Philippines. There are CD shops that you need to scour for star licks, instructionals, right? Like just the bass player of Michael, the late bass player of Michael Jackson, Music Man guy. So that players led me to explore slapping stuff. So you guys, you can just type in YouTube and everything will be at your fingertips. So cherish this opportunity to learn.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, when I started, we let me think. When I was 12, like CDs hadn't come out yet. I don't think CDs had actually even existed till I was maybe like 13 or 14.
Cassettes. All right.
Cassettes or records or even 8-tracks, which are extra annoying to deal with. I mean, especially, and some of them you'd be halfway through a song and then it would switch tracks.
Right.
Which is just like holy, horrible. But just, and obviously because these albums also were being recorded on tape, very often they, their speed was being changed. So they weren't in a standard tuning, but then, then maybe your cassette player wasn't necessarily playing. Maybe it was too fast. Maybe it was too slow. Maybe that was true of your record player too. So you're always constantly having to make a decision about like what, is this really an EM hearing?
Right. The challenge and the challenge of learning songs back in the day. Also, when you do rewinds, what was that? Oh my gosh, the head is already broken.
Oh, totally.
Or the cassette.
Yeah, I remember a friend of mine had I think it was a TIAC. It was a TIAC cassette deck, and it was one of the first cassette decks that I remember that actually had a repeat AB on it, so you could set a loop. So if we got to the end and back to the back.
Wow.
So if you had to,
we didn't have.
Yeah,
we didn't have that here in Manila. Manual, bro. I mean, you take a Mongol pencil, rewind it. Oh man.
Oh yeah. And you've already at that point you've especially if it's a really fast lick and it's new. I mean, like I remember trying to learn the the ascending lick in like YYZ, or
YYZ, yeah.
YYZ for Americans, YYZ for Canada or any place that's a colony of the Britons, this YYZ, but the bass already sounds sort of like a guitar, and it's really fast, and I don't even know what the hell key it's in, because it's so you just kind of at a certain point you just have to sort of like instinct kind of kicks in, I guess, and you just have to kind of
True.
I guess this is the note.
I guess this is the right note, right? You have to use your best judgment.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, fun. I mean, because
but now you can slow things down and speed things up now without changing the pitch or isolate instruments,
right.
or it's just
those apps, man. I mean, the cats nowadays are really blessed with those apps. Back in the day, I mean, we didn't had that. Yeah. But I think that training, I don't know if you'll agree with me, that training that we had in our generation really cultivated the skill here.
Oh, no doubt about it, because I think of the players, like, there were like the generation or two, even before my generation, and think about how much better they were. And I think some of that too just comes down to the fact that there's probably like so much less competing for your entertainment time, in a sense.
Right.
I mean, just for us, there was no internet. There's even a cable TV. I mean, there was barely any channels. So growing up, either you were like, you're into sports and you played a sport, or you did music, or you were an art kid, and some of us were all three of those things, so you had to.
Those are the three choices, right? Absolutely,
exactly.
I agree.
We're now kids are playing video games, or everybody has a YouTube channel, and they everybody thinks that everybody has a podcast that thinks they're so. It's just kind of interesting. So I guess what I'm saying is, I think we just had to spend more time honing the craft. Maybe those repetitions have something to do with it and add some nuance. Because certainly, I mean, you look at like a band like the Eagles. I remember when they first got back together and did their reunion tour, and they were ballsy enough to, hey, let's record the first night of our tour, and their harmonies are like, like so
spot on.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like they never stopped, and that just doesn't happen by happenstance. It just happens from just doing it and over again, and being talented. Being talented, definitely doesn't hurt, but there's a certain work ethic that gets it done for sure.
True. I mean, there's one thing that I always say on my because on my Facebook page. Sometimes I do Facebook live streams about Q&A, some tips, best practices on our instrument. I always, I sounded like a broken record, because I always say this, like, there is no substitute to the shed.
Oh, no doubt about it.
There is no. I mean, how you play, in my humble opinion, how you play, it's just the summary of how you spend your time here.
Definitely.
Because I am a keen believer of, for me, my humble opinion, that I believe in skill before the gear. I love gear. Yes, I fix gear almost every day. Absolutely. But let's say I'll give this bass mods to a beginner, but he doesn't practice, and he expects to excel on his playing. Come on, wake up.
Right. It won't make a bit of difference. Where if you give, I think my first bass was a Hondo, like a red Hondo Fame bass with a cream colored P bass pickup, no pick guard, and which I don't think I ever owned. I never had another red instrument after that. I don't think, but scarred me for life. But like you were saying with Sire, I mean, you can get such a well made instrument now for
less
nothing. Yeah, where even instruments now that are a couple $100, or even it's amazing how decent they are. There's almost no bad beginner instruments anymore. I mean, and certainly everything I've come across seems to be capable of being set up or having a little bit
right
of maybe like refinement done to it, maybe through the frets or something. But hey,
right,
it's still really solid.
Right, but also, and based on my experience at the shop, I mean, good strings do count. I always tell my clients that please do not sacrifice the strings. What you install on your bass, it's just the thing that you will get out from it. You install crappy strings, reap crappy results. Thus, also, bad effect is it does eat up your frets. Crappy strings, they eat up your frets faster. So, just to give you a background, here in the Philippines, there are a lot of cheap basses here due to budget constraints here in the Philippines. So I have encountered clients here that has a P bass that maybe just $100 Chinese P bass that I'll set up, but when I put good strings on that P bass, it sounded very decent.
Yeah,
man. So,
well, I mean,
yeah, go ahead, please.
Well, I was going to say, I kind of have, I think some folks will get kind of focused on like tone woods and that sort of thing, and I think in the acoustic world, I can see that really, being a big part of the pie, in terms of like the sonic pie. But I think what's solid, and again, I anybody who wants to debate me, leave comments and we can have a debate about it. But ultimately, I feel like, especially for bass, it's all kind of like what's making contact with the strings. So it's like, first it's you, the strings, how their relationship to the fretboard and the pickups primarily, and I think that's probably 90% of it. I think from there, maybe the rigidity of the instrument and how much. I guess how much energy is the instrument, or like you say, the nut, or like the witness points of the strings, basically the nut, how the strings are anchored, what the material of the saddles are, how much energy is it, basically like like the damping effect, how much is it stealing from the strings, and
right.
It seems like that kind of like directly imparts something onto the sound, but beyond that, I don't think the sound has enough time to develop within that magnetic field to really, for the wood to have to be much more than like a little sliver of the pie, really. I think Marcus Miller can pick up almost anybody's instrument and you go, yeah, that's Marcus Miller. I mean, I think
absolutely. And we have a lot of examples of the greatest bass players. I saw Miller pick up a Music Man. Still, he sounds like Marcus on a Music Man, on a Music Man tone.
Well, right, and and ultimately, I mean, Music Man. If you think about it, it's really like you just take these two jazz pickups, and Leo Fender kind of put them in one case and kind of put them here. So it's kind of a J bass, different magnets.
Kind of,
yeah. But no, you're right. It's just
there's also I look up to this player very much, and before having the his Mark bass signature bass, he was with Fodera. So I'm talking about Richard Bona. So
yeah, he's a monster, man.
So I tell you a quick story. He goes to a music store, pulls out a Kalayu bass, and I'll close my eyes. I can hear Bona.
Yeah. Oh, for
So
sure.
it's a Kalayu bass. Come on.
Well, but that's the thing. I mean, no amount of gear is going to impart personality, I guess. I mean, no matter how much I think, and ultimately, I'll be the first to admit, I mean, like anyone who's ever, at least I know when I hear myself play back through the speakers or whatever, like I know everybody I'm basically ripping off either intentionally or unintentionally. It's like I feel like we're all kind of a culmination of this, the things that we've heard, and it kind of imparts some sort of something on the way we play. But also there's I don't know, it's just that personality in it. And I think bass players in general have kind of a different way of approaching music compared to, say, guitar players generally, or singers or keyboard players. Well, I mean, keyboard players are a little bit different too sometimes, but just in terms of, you have to really kind of approach it more from a macro overseeing, knowing everything that's going on.
I dig you, man. You are so much as a bass player. You are so much responsible for the overall feel of the band.
Yeah.
For overall, you and the drummer will dictate the overall groove or feel of the band. Also, harmony. I mean, in my humble opinion, whatever note you play here is the final chord of the whole band.
That's totally, I was going to say. So you're deciding what the chord really is, ultimately.
Doesn't matter if the keyboard player plays C and you just hit an open E. It's C over E, man. You get what I'm saying? So example, the stuff you're telling me. I love this bass. This is a Fender Miller.
Indeed.
But I don't sound like him, even though. Well, that's why I tell players, like, I own this bass. I love this bass so much, but it's my main bass. I don't sound like him.
Right. And again, and there's reasons for it. And I have this discussion, I would say, I mean,
for sure. It has been a debate for so long, but
I mean, if I had to put a number on, at least a couple times a week, where someone will break it down to, and again, I mean, at a certain point in my life, I would have thought in a similar way, but someone will say, what pickups will give me that Marcus Miller sound? Or, maybe what preamp will give me that Marcus Miller sound? And it's just like, from there, the first thing I kind of ask is, I will usually ask them about what pickups they currently have, what preamp they currently have, and then what the rest of their signal chain looks like. Because here's the thing. I mean, if you think about Marcus's sound, I mean, then you look at his rack and he's got like an Empirical Labs distressor compressor. So he's got like an almost $2,000 compressor, which because of the fact that he's, the style of pickups, those Fender style, like in terms of, pole magnets, when you look at that signal, the initial, like in the treble register, the attack transient is really high, but then the mids and the lows stay relatively constant. So you need a compressor that can deal with that attack transient without getting that squeezing and sucking and breathing thing.
Right.
So instantly, right out of the chute, you need a really good compressor to deal with what those pickups put out. So sometimes you can, going with a completely different pickup, than what Marcus uses, based on what that person is using for strings and what they are plugging into, is going to have a better chance of giving you a Marcus type of sound than going with like, most of what he has. If that makes any sense.
Right. So basically, also everything within a player's rig in general is contributing to his overall sound.
Definitely.
But do you agree with me that it still starts with the player?
Oh, big time. Because honestly, very, very often, and sometimes the more equalization options somebody has, because I think a very tiny percentage of people in this world really know what to do with EQ. And those people are mixing records, when you get right down to it. And that's why I think it's great now that we get to hear like isolated versions of instruments, because because ultimately I think in a mix, bass tends to sound a little bit more, I guess, like edgy and ugly than people think that it does, because when it's in the context of everything, it sounds really nice.
Really nice.
but when you're playing by yourself and there's nothing else, and you can have as much low end or as much mids in a certain place or as much treble as you want, you can make it fill so much space, but you can't fill all that space in reality. So that's why, because that's one of the big, and I'm sure you get this too, is like, how can I cut through the mix better? And it's just like, well, first of all, you need to not crank your bass control all the way up, and not it's like if you turned all your EQ all the way up or just set it all flat, that's really just a volume control at that point, and
true. And also with EQ, not a lot of peeps nowadays know how to really tweak those frequencies. I mean, again, it's up to our ears how in my humble opinion, it boils down to your listening preferences, most likely. So I always tell my listeners also to have a broad listening palette. Yeah. Like example, just to share, I'm more of a gospel like player, R&B, jazz also, but also during the pandemic, man, I had a collaboration with a friend. He asked me to learn Polyphia.
Oh, gee. Right. That's
Gent, man.
Yeah.
Totally out of my. It's totally out of my comfort zone. And he introduced that. This was last year. He introduced to me Polyphia. He wanted to cover Crush. If you're familiar with that piece. When I heard the bass, wow, it was technically demanding. And he wanted to publish the collaboration within a month's time. I told my friend, wait a second. This dude has been doing that technique for so long, and I have 1 month to cram and learn that technique.
And record it.
Well, it was fun. I mean, it was fun. I learned a lot to do that hybrid thing, but forgot the bass player's name. But kudos to him. I mean, stepping out of your comfort zone, just learning, being a student, as I've said earlier, because in my how I approach it is, my first question is, what can I learn from Polyphia? What can I learn from James Jamerson, from Jocko? So it's a language. So you put it all together within you, and you come up with your own language. So it's vocabulary.
Oh, big time. I mean, just like if you're looking, if you're looking at authors, like even you take an author, a set of authors, and they're all writing in English, but
Right.
they're all using the language very differently and telling a different type of story and have a different style
Absolutely.
of doing it. Just a different different cadence, especially like with poets too, just different cadences and uh,
Absolutely.
yeah. So what was your from playing Polyphia? What was your big takeaway in terms of like what's in
I've
terms of
learned how to use. I've learned how to use drives.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, cool,
but
man. I mean, also just aside from having a shop, my remote work during the pandemic, because uh, being a session guy, I was I sent tracks to clients if they wanted the bass track. So it clearly also expanded my horizon about exploring more R&B. Actually, honestly, aside from the negative things that happened all around us, sometimes you just need to find the good in something. So for me, I enjoyed that period of time until today, doing my personal R&D, not
yeah,
just with the repair stuff, R&D. Also, as a bass player, as a musician myself. So, and just to share, I love the HX units. I have the stomp, hands down. I love the stomp.
oh, it's incredible.
So
I mean, being someone that used to tour. I mean, a very little bit. I'm not going to like overblow the amount of touring that I've done because it was we put out like one album on a label and toured a couple times. It was not not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. It was a big deal for me at the time.
what stuff do you
But
what of music? What type of music do you play,
uh,
Frank?
progressive metal. So
Wow,
uh,
progressive
but
metal.
but back then I was towing around. It was I never could figure out what year it was, but it was a 69 or 70 SVT, and but I also had a rack that I had at the time. Well, there's different incarnations of it, but essentially, what was a line mixer to deal with the different outputs of like a two like a fretted bass and a fretted bass and a fretless bass, an upright
Mm,
bass, a Chapman stick briefly, which I never really got good at, but also a guitar.
interesting.
So I would
Like
run.
Tony Levin, huh?
Yeah, so you'd have you had the guitar amp that was doing double duty for for the high strings of the for the melody strings of the stick, but when you're playing bass, I was also mixing the guitar amp with the SVT
Right.
tone, that sort of thing.
Awesome.
But the idea of like having and then have a switching system, and so having to learn have all the MIDI going on and having to learn all these different individual pieces of gear, and then have something go wrong and have to like chase down miles of cabling, but to be able to do all of that in a Helix unit or something, like one of these quad Cortex units where
Right.
it basically is reproducing everything as close to perfect, and isn't a head that weighs 85 pounds.
True. I'm
Yeah.
just
It's crazy.
I'll give yeah, technology. I mean, hands down. I mean, as really evolved so much. Just a quick story about that. Because just to also to give you a background here in the Philippines, it's not like in the States that you bring your own stuff. So what you when you arrive at a bar, what you see of the provided bass amp, that's it for the night. If it's a crappy
Deal with it.
amp,
Yeah.
you have to deal with it. I mean, so it has been like that for so long here. But I'm making a practice right now here, since um, through influencing the local players here. Last Friday, just to share, it's my first gig since 3 years.
Oh,
First live gig.
Congrats! Good luck. Right leg, man.
Last Friday. So I brought in my whole board with my it's a small bar, but a Fender Rumble.
I was going to ask you too. Like one of the photos you sent me, it looks like you pedal boards too. But continue on. We'll talk about that after too. Where like that seems like especially if you're using a different amp every night, bringing your pedal board can be a huge thing.
Right. So I usually I have a couple of effects before, but a friend of mine also, shout out to if ever he'll be able to listen to this. Ray, he's my good friend from UK. Knows a lot of stuff. Like then how he asked me, how do you hook up your board? Just straight to the front of the amp. And so he said, why don't you do the 4-cable method? And I was like, what was that? Then that led me to explore. And honestly, before my first gig last Friday, I was experimenting back and forth with the Helix unit with my patches because my goal for me is I want that consistency within my recorded sound and my live sound as much as possible, being consistent. And so I shared to my page that I brought in my Fender Rumble. It's a 500 watt cab, so it's a small bar, so it will suit the current acoustics of the place, the size of the venue. So pretty much I was very happy with the result. And also last Sunday I got to serve at our local church. I used the pedal board again. It's consistent. I only have to adjust a little bit, maybe because of the acoustics, cut the low mids a little bit to take out the mud or something, but pretty much I'm pretty happy. Also, the light bulb moment for me regarding these multi effects was I was fret leveling a neck. Facebook Live of Kinga Glink. Pretty girl. Are you familiar with Kinga Glink?
No.
Please search her.
You'll tell me how to spell it. Yeah.
Quite a challenge to spell her name.
Well, you can tell me after.
Right, but anyway, so I saw her Facebook Live performance. Wow, so ampless setup. So I was not exploring the multi effects stuff for so long. So pretty much for a couple of years, direct to the amp, whatever. So I was fret leveling. Then I saw her. I was watching her performance. Wow, what is that sound? It's so clear and no amp. So anyway, I asked her at the chat. She gladly responded. So what was that? What was that on your at your foot? Oh, this is my camper profile. What? So I researched about it. Then that led me to, well, I don't have a camper, but I have an HX unit, so I'm pretty much happy with it. And also I checked the reviews and stuff. So it has been. I'm using my board also for recordings or remote recording. So I'm pretty much happy with the result, Frank.
Well, the thing is too with the with something like the HX is that it versus the Kemper Profiler is yes, do they do very similar things? Yes, they do, but how you get there is very different. Where with the Profiler, it's great for someone who already owns a whole bunch of gear, and they
okay.
So like for instance, like we were talking about Tony Levin briefly earlier. So he's been just saw him last summer. Well, yeah, I guess it was technically the summer. Maybe it was early fall. But it was one of the last shows with King Crimson. And he basically he has two Kemper profilers. And
see,
because they're all wearing in-ears, and they all just have like little little wedges on stage, that sort of thing. But I remember a few years ago, he was like, you could find they were selling off his stuff on eBay because as he would make, basically, he'd go and make these, do his. I'm trying to think of what you call it, like the profiles of the things that he had, and he'd save his profiles, and he wouldn't need the amp anymore. So he just started selling off, calling his herd basically, So he started selling, so stuff like certain Trace Elliott amps and certain cabinets and certain things were just becoming available. So he has like pretty much everything he's ever owned. He carries around these couple Kemper profilers. But for everybody else, if you don't already own, a whole stable of amplifiers and effects and stuff, something like the Helix,
right.
Already has all those things, so that's
absolutely. I mean,
pretty cool.
Also, did my research about the Helix with the place that who uses the Helix line. I'm a big fan of Yannick Vizdala. I mean, in terms of the effects lord. I mean, he has a whole bunch of pedal library. So he uses the HX unit as well. So also. It's not evident in my playing, but much respect for Billy Sheehan. I mean, he's also a Line 6 endorser.
He's actually a really in the pocket groovy player. I mean, that's the thing is like I think a lot of folks who aren't familiar with his music, because he's done so many. Again, another guy's done so many different projects. So you'll see clips of him just doing crazy things, but when he just hits the groove.
Yeah.
Have you heard his band Niacin before? Which is it was basically Dennis Chambers on drums and this guy Jay Novella playing a Hammond B3. So they essentially
This is a trio.
Yeah, it's a trio. So it's kind of instrumental trio. So just kind of like doing heavy, sort of heavy jazz in a sense, or Billy would call it like fake jazz because he's a jazz player. But like they do a version, like kind of a Hammond B3 bass version.
You gotta check that out.
Of Van Halen Mean Streets, which is just like incredible. It's just like playing all the parts, and it's Dennis Chambers just has this feel, and it's just so
monster,
so groovy. It's just. But yeah, Billy's awesome. He's just like so, just in the pocket. I love his growly tone.
Right. I mean, much respect for the dude. I mean.
He's a wicked nice dude too. Just a wicked.
Also,
nice dude.
Yeah.
When you see him in interviews,
really
like, I've met him twice at like clinics, and that's who he is. He's just this kind of happy-go-lucky, just is happy to talk about bass stuff, and just really genuinely, gives a damn. It's just really nice guy.
True. Right. I mean, with the evolution of technology for like the profilers, the quad cortex, the helix stuff.
It's getting so small, which is just really cool.
Right.
And with touchscreens, it's all getting so much easier to use too. Where my gosh, it used to be you have like a little tiny screen for something, and just menus,
I used to have the Korg AX effects before. Like,
oh my god,
so tiny. My
yeah.
Gosh. So that's why I sold it before. So it's been a lot. Only last September of last year, I switched back to going multi with the HX unit, and I've never been, really happy. I'm really happy with the result. Also, just to share also, I joined a small Facebook HX users group. They're having a giveaway for they were giving away Stomp XLs, HX Helix natives plugins. I won the plugin.
Oh right, yeah.
And I was so thankful because I use it a lot for my work. So it's very useful, man. I mean, my point is technology has really grown and still evolving as we speak. But the problem with some of my friends that are the old school guys, they're really having a hard time to evolve or catch up. I mean, some of them are kind of in the purest mindset. I mean, they're not really. You need to be in music. You need to be open for evolution.
Oh, for sure.
If you want to grow, yeah, and in life in general, if you want to grow, yeah, as I've said, change is constant.
Well, I mean, I think we're going to hit a time too where, especially, I was talking about this with someone a couple shows ago, where especially now, with the war in Ukraine, that and the embargoes and things, most of the tubes in the world, vacuum tubes for amplifiers are made in Russia and in Ukraine and some in China as well. But there's some manufacturers who just can't get tubes to make things right now. So the likelihood of having an amp that you need to change out your tubes, I can see a time where that technology is getting so old that I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if the music industry itself, in terms of just just making tubes specifically for guitar and bass amplifiers and obviously high end mic preamps and that sort of thing. I don't know if that is enough to sustain keeping vacuum tube factories open to make tubes. I don't know if it's a large enough
market and all, right?
Thank you. Yeah,
especially with the rise of the IR technology, man.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, I was shocked to use because how I set up my pedal board is I completely bypass just to share. I completely bypass the front of the amp. So practically
you have preamps on your pedal board, so you really don't need the preamp of the amp. It's kind of an X factor.
Right.
You show up and there's a different amp. Right.
Pretty much the Helix acts as my amp. So I have presets there, and I was really surprised that it sounded really good.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean,
and feels right too.
And that's the main thing. It feels right too. So still, some others are skeptic about it. That the one that you're telling me a while ago, that they sad. It can come a time that amplifiers can be replaced with these digital things. And I can see that it's going there.
Oh, there's no doubt about it.
It's going there.
Yeah, I mean, the band I'm in, we've been using in-ear monitors for a long time, so we're really used to it. But the cool thing about it is that we got a little digital console, so we have an app on our phone, basically. So everybody has their own bus. So you can pull up your bus, and you got little faders on your phone for every
right. You can do your own mix on your in-ear.
Right,
awesome.
but the thing that's neat is the mix that works for you in rehearsal is the same mix you get when you get on stage, and the only thing that we really had to modify at all was I know initially I tried playing just without any sort of backline whatsoever. But of course, there is a certain interaction between your instrument and the amp that you just don't get when you're just playing in headphones. I mean, for instance, on a louder stage, I mean,
right.
you can hit a note, and that note just goes on naturally because there's it's not feedback, but there is some the air that's being moved by the amplifiers hitting those strings, and it's just continuing on, essentially. So just having just enough amplification to kind of help support that. So especially for playing bass, so you feel it a little bit. So it fills in kind of what the what the headphones or the inner monitors really can't do to kind of simulate that feel essentially. But it just makes it so easy so that, the front of house guy can just deal with the way the room sounds. For us and our inners, it always sounds the same. That's
right.
the thing that's really about it.
The thing is, consistency, right? You can have that consistency at the palm of your hands, not like not like years ago, like you're at the mercy of the sound at a sound guy, right?
Well, yeah, and you get into a room where where sometimes the if the room is really just reflective and maybe is making some really harsh like upper mid frequencies or something, and you just need to so you go and you make that adjustment on your amp, for instance, and you just like go make all that go away, and so now that signal's being sent to the front of house, and the front of house guy's getting a totally different thing. So now he has to go and undo the adjustment you just made, at your amp, So that's the thing. I think a lot of guys end up kind of fighting their sound guy sometimes too,
Or the sound guy just kicks in that big old limiter and kills all your sound.
Oh yeah. Well, that's the thing too that I think a lot of guys don't realize too is that a lot of guys like are kind of against playing with compression, but they don't understand that when their dynamics are jumping all over the place, especially in sections where you're trying to hammer out if you're like got a steady kind of like just driving thing going on and maybe the player isn't super consistent. Well, if every so often you're hitting a really loud note that shouldn't be there, I mean, the sound guy kind of doesn't have like any choice but to kind of back you off. Where if you're properly compressed, you can actually be louder because there's no fear of you suddenly overtaking.
Then the sound guy can push you further out to the front of the house, right?
Absolutely. It can. That's why, certain
as they say, it's better to cut than to boost.
Oh, no doubt about it. But it's so funny how many folks, and I run into all the time, why is my preamp so noisy? And I always like, okay, well, I start off with, what are you plugging into? And like, okay. And they'll tell me they have some amp, it could be like a Gensler or a GK, or, something with a nice 4-band, semi-parametric EQ. Okay, well, how do you have those EQ control set?
All this stuff.
I just have them set flat. And I'm thinking, okay, so they're trying to get all of their tone with the onboard EQ. So it's like, okay, well, where do you have the tone control stuff for that? And they've got the treble cranked all the way up, and the mids down, and it's just like, okay, well, here's the thing, so you crank that treble up, so now you're increasing the noise flare when you're closer to the pickups, but then it's the amp. Now the treble's set back at flat on the amp, so it's essentially cutting by 50% or greater that boost that you're making, where if you set everything flat on the bass and then dial in the most aggressive tone you'd want on the amp, then you can go and say, well, hey, I need a rounder sound now. Let's roll off some treble, and I can have a little ballady kind of round sound. Oh, hey, let's roll back some mids, and now have a slap tone. Where some preamps are more for like tone shaping, but others, like say the Glock and Clang is a great example, because I think it's treble. The treble set at like it's either 10 or 20K. It's like it's way high up. There's no
high.
Well, there's no bass note information up there. So I think primarily it's really there so that if there is like some hiss or noise in the system, you can go and basically remove it without really changing the tone. Where if you crank it up, all of a sudden, well, there's all that hiss. You can't do anything above that. It's there. It exists, Where, and same thing, the bass, I think is set at like 20 hertz, which again, I think it's really more or less there to kind of help the speakers to be more efficient. It's not, something to roll off to keep, speakers from, too much excursion, from being too floppy on really low notes. So it's not, so the treble and the bass aren't really there for tone shaping. They're really kind of there to preserve the sound of, again, the fingers and the strings and the pickup with but with getting rid of the noise and getting rid of the excess flub, But then other preamps, things like Dark Glass Tone Capsule, has very bass relevant, frequency points.
Right.
Yeah. True. Bartolini TCT. Actually, the Bartolini NTMB, the fretless version. A lot of guys use that for frettage because the treble is set in it's like I think it's like 4.5K, which is kind of where a typical passive tone is set, right? You know, so it's very bass relevant, you know. But if you try to make all of that happen with just the onboard preamp, it's just the wrong way to use the EQ. Ultimately, I think.
Right. Also, sometimes what I noticed with some players, like you really need to needs to get down first to the core of your tone. I mean, your clean tone first before you fiddle with all of those knobs, all of those added preamps.
Oh, yeah.
Because my headphones just died anyway, but I can still hear you. But
yeah, I could tell you lost a little bit of volume. Your tone quality changed a little bit, but it's still fine. It's still fine.
All right, I'll come in near. All right. So how about this?
Oh, that's much better. Yeah, much better.
All right. So yeah, I mean, I encountered also a couple of clients that hey, I can get seem to get my sound right. I'll ask them one thing: how do you sound direct? Can I hear you play it first? And if they, a lot of times they can't produce a good direct clean tone, and you gotta fix first the meat and potatoes. I mean, your clean tone. Because whatever they have this mentality that okay, if I put this pedal in my chain, my sound will improve. But that is not necessarily the case for most people.
Agreed.
But if you get your sound right on a clean tone, you won't have any problems dialing.
Very much. Tone. Right. I mean, like.
Do you agree with that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, I always tell folks that like if you like, especially anyone who wants to change their preamp, thinking that that's why they don't like the way their bass sounds. And so after a few questions, you know, especially I'll usually ask if they have an active passive switch, if the preamp can be bypassed, and then I'll ask them if they don't have that, then I'll ask them what if they like the way the pickups sound with the EQ set flat, and you know, and I find a lot of times, especially if they have an instrument, you know, and I'm not picking on Ibanez at all because they make some great instruments, but you know, sometimes somebody will have, you know, something like a Sound Gear or a BTB, something that has like say like MKs, and you know has soap bars, and maybe this person's used to playing a jazz bass, and they're looking for something that's more articulate sounding, and they're like, you know, no matter what they do, they can't get that articulate sound. It's really kind of a matter of like, well, hey, you know, those pickups are never going to sound the way you're expecting it. You want it to sound, and it's certainly, you know, changing the preamp isn't going to correct the problem of the pickups. But basically, you know, I mean, ultimately, if you're used to the sound of something that's like a single coil, or even like a split coil that sounds like a single coil these days, you know, then you can get soap bars that do that, you know, and that'll kind of fix your problem.
Right.
But I mean, I'll even go a step further than that. I bet that you can pick up a bass without even plugging it in, and you can tell right away just by the way, in terms of what you're hearing from it acoustically, if it's probably going to sound right when you plug it in. You know, like I've had guys tell me like, oh, you know, how can I get that growl out of my fretless? And it's like, well, okay, well, does it growl when you play it acoustically? Well, no.
Right.
Well, what's the action? Like, you know, the action's this high. Well, it's not going to growl. It's going to sound thuddy, like an upright that's set high or something. It's like it's not ever going to growl. It's not an electronics issue. It's a setup issue or a technique issue that can be addressed. You know.
Aside from that, a lot of I always say this on my live Facebook stream on Sincopado, Luthier services. Guys, bass players, they need to check on their right hand technique. A lot of players, they are so focused with shapes, scales, and all, they forgot that this thing, if you're a lefty player, I mean, your plucking hand dictates first your tone, or if you're using a plectrum, this thing. I mean, because I will have some. Facebook messages like, hey, I can't get the right sound out of it. Can you play? I mean, can you send me a video, like a 20-second video, just do some riffs, or I want to see you play. Then most of the time I'll see the right hand technique, but this is a big factor also. How you block, how you slap, how you strike your strings will also determine your tone.
Oh, no doubt about it.
Before those thingamajigs, those pedals, it starts with how you block. And also, I always tell them, explore this area, where and how you pluck this area.
Oh, there's no question. There's no question about that. I mean, a great example of that. There's a particular set of Delano Pickups that I use a lot, and I found a demo for them. So I think they were demoing a Marlowe bass, one of those really nice French-made
Marlowe basses. Right?
Yeah, but the player was playing so close to the bridge that everything he played, no matter what setting, if he was using the neck pickup, either as parallel or series, or single coil, or the bridge pickup, or both pickups together, it all kind of sounded just middly and harsh. It didn't matter because he just never really deviated from playing essentially between the bridge and the bridge pickup. So he was just playing it in a way that I personally was just never ever going to play it there. So the sound was never going to. So it kind of made pickups that really sound very rich, but are also articulate. You just would not have gotten that from that demonstration just because of the playing technique. Ultimately,
right?
Yeah,
I'm a firm believer that if I posted this stat on my business page on Sincopado, that improve your touch equals improve your tone.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
I mean, basically, you check your right hand technique. Check. I'm at this point in time. Whenever I shed, I always check on how I pluck the strings. If sometimes just by changing the angle, I can hear the changes also.
Oh, for sure. Oh, there's no doubt about that.
It's a different part of the meat of your fingers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have a really tough nails basically. And I when I was younger, when I started, I was 12. Back then you could get a job when you were 12. And my first job was washing dishes at a restaurant, so I could buy a better bass. And so as a result, I played really hard back then, and I'd get blood blisters on my fingers, especially this finger. And then I'd go and I'd wash dishes, and then my fingers would get would get, of course, all pruny, and then the blister would just fall off, and so where there used to be a callus, the callus would just fall off in the damn dishwater, right? So then blood blister all over again, that sort of thing. But over time, you start to figure out, what gauge of strings works best for you, for the way you play. And my nail got tougher. So I started having lower action, playing a little bit softer, but, just knowing basically the range of dynamics in terms of how much force I use to play, what works for me. So you can make it sound like you're taking it very easy and get a very clean tone, or just kind of dig in a little bit and really make it sound like you're playing hard. But that just comes from just the experience of figuring out what that range is that you need, where, if I were to get on a bass at really high action, I'd have to play really hard again, or never be able to get that sound, basicly, kind of like 80s Geddy Lee, basically, when he was playing the wall basses. He was playing Rotosound. They were called PSD. I think it was piano string design. But he was playing a 30 for his G string and a 90 for his E. So it was 30 to 90 gauge.
Wow.
So it would sound like he was slapping, but usually he was basically playing with one finger most of the time, doing this kind of up and down technique, but wasn't playing super hard. But because the strings were so light, he could really dig in it. And and you'd hear all those little ghost notes and you know, pops. Right. I mean, if you were to listen to that stuff, weren't familiar with Geddy Lee, you might think that he was slapping and popping because it sounded funky. Right. He was just playing with one finger most of the time. You know,
wow.
kind of, yeah. But so much of that probably wouldn't have been possible with heavier strings and, you know, a different technique. Sure. And yeah.
Also, it all depends on, you know, the player's touch. Then again, I mean, you mentioned Geddy and also example for Jocko. When you listen for Jocko, like, yeah, man. I mean, his touch is phenomenal. Whenever I watch YouTube videos of the camera guys focusing on this section, wow, yeah. that touch.
But he's playing very much like an upright player too. Like he'd use like the sides of his fingers,
right.
Sometimes too to get more of a fleshier tone. But then he could like turn over and use the tips of his fingers to get a harder, more True. A closer approximation to more of a pick kind of tone. You know, it could just really but just altering it a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. Then you go to the modern players such as Adrian Ferrod. Like
oh god, yeah, all this the double thumbing thing.
Crazy.
I can work at that for the next 10 years. I'll never get there. I mean, it's such a new thing, and you know, I'd have a better chance with my primitive one finger technique. You know, of getting anything done. You know,
sometimes when I watch bass players, I'm more particular with the right hand. I want to see his right hand. How does he block his strings? I mean, how does he? Because that's how he gets the sound out. Primarily first. Yeah. So improve your touch, improve your tone.
Yeah. Oh, or even like somebody like Bobby Vega who can effortlessly between just as playing with a pick but he plays. He's an amazing finger player too. He can slap.
Also, and the shark bass.
And he seems like a wicked nice dude too. But I mean, just effortless. Effortless. But he can play again like completely by himself, and he basically is a bass and a drummer, and it feels good. Like everything he plays, there'll be this just kind of swingy kind of thing going on with it. He blows my mind. Yeah.
I mean,
all the ghost notes, and it's just incredible.
He gets calls for that tone. He gets session work for that. For that tone. I mean, I tried to learn his pick. Come on.
But
I just translated it into the thumb. So yeah, I'll leave it to Bobby.
Oh, yeah. He's just on a whole other level of refinement. It's crazy. But he's another great example of like he endorses EMG pickups. So he'll be playing a bass with EMGs, but then you'll see him. He has this. Oh God, it's a 62 or a 63. He has this really vintage, just beat to death, jazz bass. Of course, has the original pickups, and he has an older P bass.
Are you referring to the Shark bass?
I'm sorry.
Shark bass.
I might be.
Shark bass.
I might be, but
it has a big sticker of shark here. I think that's
it may be the bass, but I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, and that's what I mean is like sometimes the tonal difference from one even like drastically like, oh, here's an active pickup that has ceramic magnets and steel blades and very little winding because it has a preamp in it, and then here's this at this point like 70-year-old pickup that has Alnico magnets that are probably weakened and and was just wound by a human being, and it still sounds like Bobby Vega. And if you close your eyes, you wouldn't know that he was playing a different instrument if you were to like make a bunch of clips and play them back to back in succession. It's just an example of how the gear doesn't matter to some degree. It matters to the player because like those little tiny differences that we can hear and we can feel, it makes a difference to us, but it's not always apparent to the person who's listening to it, I guess I would say.
With that said, I also tell my students that, you know, your audience doesn't really care if you have a brass knot or a bone knot. To be honest.
I mean, does it stay in tune? Is the nut at the right height? You know,
Right.
I mean, you're really only hearing. I mean, if the nut contributes anything to the tone, you're only going to hear it for the open strings, right? I mean,
true. I mean that that's an eye opener for me as well, because I had that belief before that. Oh, okay, the sustain will be really good if you're fretting a note here. But I saw the article of the master Luthier, Roger Sadowski, that right, but it only affects the open notes basically, because you are the nut when you fret the note, right?
Right.
So,
like I play fretless 99% of the time, you know, for the most part, you know. So yeah, which is a lot of fun in a progressive metal band. Long story short, we took a big hiatus. And I said, like, hey, I'm going to play fretless most of the time, and I never thought we'd get back together again. And you know, I will play fretted sometimes, but I play completely different when I play fretted. It's not like always my favorite thing to do. There's just something about playing the fretless I feel really comfortable on, you know, but it just worked out that way. But it definitely isn't the most conducive instrument for playing progressive metal sometimes, you know, that's for sure.
Very interesting. Well, I want to hear your stuff, bro.
I'm sorry?
I want to hear your stuff. I mean, if your band, probably share it to me later on.
Well, if we manage to mix the record we're working on at some point this year, it'll be 25 years between this record and the last one we made. So hopefully, you know, our drummer's mixing it, and he's doing a great job. But you know, of course, we all have day jobs and families and stuff. So you know, and we're a 6-piece band, so you've got, you know, basically, you know, so we have a singer. Drummer, you know, drummer also is a really excellent singer. So there, you know, so sometimes it's like kind of like a co-lead sort of thing in spots. So a lot of vocals, 2 guitars all the time. Keyboard player is incredible. You know, so for me, sometimes the challenge is figuring out like where the sonic space is, and like, you know, what needs to be supported, and you know, and just kind of figuring out. Very, very often, you know, not playing is the best solution. You know, sometimes, you know, and figuring out when that is. You know.
Basis. Yeah, man. Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, the rest is like a very, you know, overlooked thing in music, right?
But a lot of young cats right now, they disregard the rest.
Yeah.
And the spaces. I mean, that's what makes it interesting. I mean, every music. Sometimes you just need to honor the whole note, right?
Very much, yeah. Well, especially, and you probably maybe something you kind of found when you were like learning the Polyphia stuff is like how much the you know, and I'm not super familiar with them. I mean, but I've only heard like, you know, some things, but you know, at least in not just gent, but like, you know, just metal, I guess in general to some degree. That, you know, the bass and the drums sometimes are like one instrument, you know, so sometimes the thing that makes the most sense to play is, you know, if there's already some really melodic stuff going on, sometimes I know just coming up with a pattern that's very like right on the kick and the snare sometimes, you know, in terms of, you know, but just, you know, outlining kind of the chords, but rhythmically, you know, with what the kick and the snare are doing. And I think with gent, you get that a lot where like the kick drum and the bass are kind of, you know, there may as well just be a trigger on the kick drum, just trigger notes, because it's just dun, 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 dun. You know, it's like, it's all, you know, dead on metronomic. Dead on. Right. Yeah. But sometimes the best thing to do is hit one big note, and the kick is doing that, and it seems like the bass is following the kick, but in reality, you're just hitting one note, and it feels like it's a bunch of separate notes sometimes.
True.
Whereas if you actually, at least for me, like if I try to hit all those notes dead on, it just ends up sounding like a jumbled mess sometimes. It just, it sometimes just having that, somebody's hitting a lower note and not playing a flurry of notes is like the most dramatic and effective thing you can do besides the rest, where sometimes there is room where you can, play something that's higher up melodically or whatever. But, that's not, I guess for bass players, I don't really think that's really what, everybody should be serving the song basically. But, if your goal is just to get noticed, those opportunities present themselves, but maybe, maybe bass isn't like the
always
band.
At the end of the day,
to pursue.
Everything should be in context. Do you agree with me?
Yes, totally.
I mean,
without context, there's
context.
There can't be a song, really. I mean,
it doesn't mean that if you can do that particular riff or chop, then you'll do it on every song, man. I mean, that is I'm sorry to be frank, but that's the problem with social media right now. But these young cats are so focused with the 30-second videos of blazing fast riffs that
it's all about clicks and likes, right? I mean, it's not really substantive. It's all clicks and likes.
Back in the day, in our upbringing, this is the one thing that probably what's missing for the younger cats is, the right mentorship. Because when I was, coming up, I had a couple of mentors that, for example, a very known drummer here in the Philippines, like, if for the slightest thing that you felt that you were rushing or dragging, he will shout out to you at on stage.
For sure.
Hey, but the younger cats right now, they don't have that luxury of but I did not take that badly. I have my off nights that there's a senior musician telling me that, hey, Adrian, you missed that note. Can you review that part? I won't suck up and I'll feel bad that it's just
get it next time, man.
That. I just accepted it, and being a student, it might be right. So I reviewed that my part. Yeah, I was not playing the harmony correctly. So, but with the young cats right now, they are much focused on for the likes, and it's not about it. It's not primarily. There are ways to market your stuff out there. The right people will come to your channel or your social sites if you are my humble opinion, if you are really true to yourself.
Right. I mean, and that's the interesting thing is that in some ways, obviously the music industry has changed dramatically. For sure. Again, old guy rant, just remembering a time when you get excited about, I'm going to go buy this record that maybe I've heard a song because I heard it on the radio way before the record came out.
You're gonna save up your allowances and buy that record,
yeah.
Right?
Oh yeah. And now you've got kind of an idea of what maybe this is going to sound like just based on the cover. Then you go and you open it up and there's like liner notes and a book, big book and pictures and I'd be interested in like who the engineer was and who produced it and where it was recorded and all that kind of stuff and then like reading the lyrics and then it just become like this event where now it's almost like music is just kind of like something that happens during video games or a movie, which is great. It's fine, but it just consumes so much differently. And I love the convenience of being able to, have access to anything I want on my phone or whatever. That's very cool. But on some level, I kind of miss there being some tangible product.
True, man. Well, absolutely. When I miss the the years that you go to Tower Records, you just buy your favorite record, you saved up for to buy that record. Versus right now, well, the convenience is nice, but probably our generation, we value that tangible thing that this is precious to me, that I'll be able to see the credits and all. But right now, the kids, they just go to Spotify or Apple Music, and it's a big it's a big difference. Well, there are pros and cons. Pros, the convenience.
The other thing too is like I feel like too, where this is certainly true. Definitely with younger folks, where it just seems like they might only know a couple songs from a certain artist or something. Where but for me it was always like I would be into the whole record. So.
Right.
So to me, like the way the album, like the way one song would go to the next song, it was that whole experience of the entire album where, it doesn't seem as if that is as much of a thing,
right.
Sadly,
sadly nowadays,
but it's also bite-sized, but yeah, it's different. It's not better or worse, but at the same token, it's like people have a better opportunity to get their art out there and be heard.
Faster.
But obviously, it poses its own set of challenges too, for the consumer, where there's just so much to weed through. But I guess in some sense, it's better than we go to the record store and you're buying something completely blind. And I think I made a comment to somebody who's almost like buying wine, where you're buying it based on like how cool the label looks or something, or like here in the States we have like craft beer, where it seems like or I guess with pedals too, sometimes like the pedal will be called some outlandish thing and have a crazy paint job or whatever, and like like it must sound better, right? So this must taste better, and this is a cool record, and you just kind of going blind with it, and maybe you're gonna like it, maybe you're not, where now you can kind of go, you get a chance to, and maybe it's good, that you get to experience a lot of different things, kind of without the monetary commitment, I guess.
Right, and also I appreciate the old cats, like for sure. I think you're familiar with Rick Beato.
Oh, I love Rick Beato. Yeah,
right. I mean, it sounds awesome, a pool of knowledge, but you can see that he did embrace the current, trend, but still being true to his roots. That I'm an old dude. I have seen how the music industry evolved throughout the years, but hey, here he is still riding the wave. But he did evolve and not shun himself like, hey, I'm an old dude. That analog is better than digital. That sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but talk about the thing that really impresses me about Rick is that the fact that he because I think this happens. I mean, ultimately, there seems to be like, I guess from, I don't know, maybe from like 12 years old to maybe like your mid 20s, that the music that you listen to in that period of time seems to be like the most influential on you. Mm-hmm. And then everybody kind of hits a certain point where like maybe you're not listening to popular music anymore. Like, I mean, I know that that's certainly true for me. But the thing that's impressive about Rick is he's just like, he's so on top of all of it. And
yeah, man.
I applaud his enthusiasm for it, and I mean, and he like when he's listening to the top 10 or something, and I mean,
this episode,
he can find something good about everything, even if I'm just going like, oh my God, I mean, this is just garbage, but he'll find something good, be it the production or like, oh my God, that's a great snare sound, or listen to that bass, or hey, this is an unusual chord progression, because like everything's become so cliched, everything's like 1-4-5. Oh, they're going to the sixth now, now we're going back to the major part of the song, where like, sometimes, it's like something's like, wow, what an unusual arrangement this is, and it's just kind of, I love watching him break that stuff down, and he's so fast at it,
his palette is so wide open. He can go from Sonic to Alan Holdsworth to Robin Ford to to BTS. I mean, it's just crazy. That open. Right. I mean, that's what I love about him. That as you said, he can find the good in everything.
Absolutely. Hey, well,
one also. Oh, yes, go ahead, please.
Oh no, you go ahead. You go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Lastly, I mean, I admire also one of the old cats. I mean, you mentioned him a while ago, Dennis Chambers. I don't know if I don't know if you've seen his recent Drumeo video.
I just watched it. Yeah, and you never heard it before. I mean, it was just really cool. I liked what he said. Like, hey, if I heard this a few years ago, this would be right in my wheelhouse. But I mean, talk about just the bravery of that, just like, letting us, it was great to see his process, but the fact you're basically seeing the process in real time, where like, you're hearing like one listen through, and he's hearing the version without the drum. So he has no idea what was played on it. And he's got his iPad over here, and he's like writing everything down. So he's like, figuring out like, what time signatures to play in what sections and how to approach it. I would love to see, I'd love to see a follow-up video where, like, if they gave him, like, let's say, like even 3 days, just to say, okay, well, hey, go 3 days with it. Now let's see, or give him a week, and like a week,
right?
See what he's done with it. It would be incredible.
That would be a good experiment, right? That would be a good experiment.
But in some sections, it was remarkable to me how like he did some things that were very similar to what Danny Carey would play in certain sections, but then there were some sections where it was just like. He went a very different direction with it, and it makes you wonder. What's fun with it is just like, how would he approach it if he knew what the drums actually sounded like? So it's really cool to just again see that whole process. It was just so neat. There's gonna be more of those videos apparently, and that's gonna be like a new. And I guess that was the first video in that series, and I think I'm gonna try to put. I might put a link to that in here as well. Yeah.
Right. I mean,
we all love drummers. I mean, that's just part of the whole thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Secretly, we probably all want to be drummers to some level as well.
Actually, that was my first instrument. But
same here, man. Yeah, I started on snare drum in 4th grade. Like we're putting together. Like we're gonna have, we're gonna do more demonstrations and stuff here. So we have this really small room, kind of this way. And so there's a bass amp in there, and there's like a we have an electronic drum set that we'll be able to plug in, be able to record, like we have an intro song for this podcast, and I want to record a new one where I'll just play everything basically, and have it be kind of like play through some different styles of things, and try to like condense it into like a few seconds basically. I think that'll be fun.
Awesome.
Like that was kind of product of the pandemic too, where I know for me, I started like wanting to learn how to play some other things. So I bought a pedal steel. I bought a pedal steel guitar because it's such a bizarro instrument, where you're basically playing everything.
You're right.
Everything's flat across. It's basic. With certain grips, it's just a triad. So either it's a 3-5-1 or a 5-1-3 or so just playing different inversions across it. You skip certain strings, but so how you move a knee lever or how you step on a pedal determines if you're playing the 1 chord, the 3 chord, the 4 chord, the 5 chord.
Totally different.
Yeah, so you have to remember, what combinations of pedals and levers create the kind of chord voicing you want. So you have to think theory all the time with it too, because you're kind of thinking physically what you have to manipulate. So it's just a whole other, it's crazy. I'll never be good at it, but if I like, they have to play like 3 chords or something, I could play get good, be able to play a phrase or something with it,
How's is it tuned in like a normal guitar, or
no, not at all. It's in what's called E9 tuning. So I'm at the very beginning of it. I bought a little course, and I'm at the very beginning of it. I had some issues with my ankles and my knees, which kind of kept me from playing it for a while too, because I just was having a hard time stepping on things or moving legs, but that's getting better now. But yeah, it's a whole other can of worms, but it has, the thing I like about it is it has real potential for making really spooky sounds, just like, doing things with delay, just like almost approaching it like a keyboard player, where you can just make big pads, like these big swells of, kind of, just like, hit, putting a certain kind of chord here, basically, and just putting this like nice kind of pad out there. It's just all, but you can also approach it like a slide guitar too, of course.
Awesome.
But yeah,
a different world.
I probably wouldn't have ever done that. It just seemed like a good idea at the time, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. That those are the things that you can view things in a good way. You just have to find a good on the certain situation, right? Learn a skill, learn a new instrument.
Yeah, but it's like anything else that you know how to play and you have a better understanding. I think especially as a bass player, it certainly it just gives you a whole other perspective for sure. But then again, your attitude as a bass player, you can't help but kind of carry that around with you to every instrument you play. I mean, there's probably a certain bass player kind of approach to, I mean, I know there is for me. If anything else I try to play, it just I think your personality just kind of follows, and your approach kind of follows you with it, I guess, to some degree.
For sure.
Yeah. So anyway, probably a good place as any to wrap up. How can people get in touch with you? And I'm going to get all your information from you. Like you sent me a link. I'd love to give people, obviously a link to your live stream, and how can folks who happen to be viewing this in the Philippines, maybe that don't know that you're there, how can they get in touch with you and all that kind of stuff?
Primarily, they can find me via my Facebook page at Sincopado Luthier Services, or I also have my Instagram page. It's my name there is Aids of Bass, so that's Alpha India Delta Zulu Off Oscar Foxtrot, then bass. So pretty much those are my. Well, I do have my YouTube channel. You can also search for Sincopado there.
Well, so we'll be sure to put links in the description for everybody as well. And I'd love to catch up with you again down the road, see how things are going. This has been a great conversation.
An honor, Frank.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you betcha. All right. Well, hey, thanks so much for being on here, and thanks everybody for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. We're super excited. Frankie and I are working really hard on putting these things together and giving you lots of interviews just like this one. We just need to get some love out there in order to get this podcast surfaced, and thanks for listening.